breathe. Really breathe. Take a moment, relax. There's a lot of good information, both CCF, Neuroendocrine Tumor Foundation, my website, NorCal Carcinoid. It's not my website, but NorCal Carcinoid, LACNets. We all have guides for the newly diagnosed that go step by step to let you, really understand your disease and better know how to frame the questions that you're going through. And I take the time to look at those. A lot of times, things I recommend to patients as well is the NCCN, which is the National Cancer Comprehensive Network, puts out guidelines. They do them for physicians. Then there's a NET guideline, but they actually have a guideline for patients as well. Understand what it is that you have and what is the common path for that, so that you don't have to be scattered about what one person says versus another. And the guidelines are really written for the 80%, not for the really unusual cases, but it grounds you. You need grounding. That's why I said breathe. It's another life lesson from in my 20s, a scuba diver instructor. He gave us three things to think about. He said, first thing, breathe. Second thing, everything leaks, everything breaks, prepare for it. Third thing, breathe. And that's really it. You got to breathe, run your life, prepare for what's coming up, understand how these things work, educate yourself, but then back to breathing. Because the actual thing about, one of the other groups that I was part of in that 10-year time frame since we met, I was already on the board of the executive board of the Society for Integrative Oncology. And part of that is learning life balance, is learning to, living longer with this disease. And we are living longer. We can see that even in the research that's being done, is that we are living longer from research period to research period. But if we're not living better, if we're not enjoying our lives, then the point of living longer isn't so good. So it's really important to really understand what's important to you, and make sure that's valued in every day. Because if all you do is run between different hysterias and different groups or you're not enjoying life. And I think the first critical thing is figure out what we had a palliative care nurse that I interviewed about a month and a half ago, and she reads a poem that said, "What matters most?" And it really is, take this time to think about what matters most, work on your care. And it's a little hard for people like me, and then put it away. Make your decisions, do what you need to do, put it away, come together when you need to come together. One other person I was influenced by when I was a teenager, and then again, in his, as his life was ending, was Warren Zevon. You remember Warren Zevon?
Sure.
Yeah, so he died of a pretty rough lung cancer, but the only time David Letterman had one guest for an entire show was shortly after Warren Zevon's diagnosis. They were really great friends, and they spent the entire show together with Warren Zevon doing gigs as he could, or doing certain jams. But David asked him a question about, what do you want? You're in this really terminal mode. What should you tell the rest of us who aren't? How can you? And he said, the one thing I've learned is enjoy every sandwich. And it really is, you have to find joy, because we all have that moment where, life is terminal. At the end of the day, I haven't met anyone who lives forever. I've got one or two in my support group who believe that they're going to live forever, and I'm looking forward to celebrating that with them. But in the meantime, enjoy every sandwich. And that's the other thing that I think is really important. And if you can use a support group to help you find that joy, that's fantastic. it's your health. At the end of the day, it's your body, and the decisions. You know, we're not in a disease that has a huge amount of great data. We have some really good phase 3 studies about what the right choices are in certain aspects, but we certainly don't have a huge playbook. And so whether it's you or a family member or someone you trust, you're going to have to be educated, because at the end of the day, when you take a look at the NCCN guidelines, they only go so far. There's good things for if you have surgery, have it. If you can't, then you're positive, go, somatostatin analog. But then everything after that is or. And you can go to 3 different docs and the ors will all be different. And none of them are wrong. They're right, but they don't necessarily know you and what your life goals are and what matters, not to reuse a phrase, but what matters most to you. And so you've got to advocate for your own care and understanding what you want from it, and be able to also really articulate really what matters and what concerns you have. And one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, and we only have a half hour, so I don't know we'll get this all in. For the last 2 years, I've been going around the country doing what I've called Speaking Up, which is a program about learning to talk to your doctors about talking about your disease, about talking about your symptoms, about really speaking up and letting the medical community know what's impacting you. And that's why it's important, because if you don't describe what's going on and what matters, they can't help you. There's no pat answer. After a few answers, they are really individualized. And if you can't articulate that for yourself, if you can't be present in your care, that makes it really difficult to get what's right for you. And that's why it's important to learn how to advocate. Or, there's a few docs and a few patients who say you've got to be your own quarterback. So look, not everyone can be a quarterback. This is a hard thing. But we know how to play on a team. And if you can't be a quarterback, find a wife or someone else, or husband, or some relative who can help quarterback the care. Or if you have to, find that physician that you believe enough to be your quarterback, and then that's your quarterback. But we're not all quarterbacks, but we are all part of a team, and we have to speak up in part of that team. And that's really about being able to advocate and say what you believe or what you think is important. And so, that's how I would answer that one. Even when I was first part of patient groups and working with the SNMMI and asking to, people wanting to quote me, I was very cautious about my privacy. And I, for whatever reason, used to only say Josh M instead of my full name, because, honestly, it's unfortunate, but our health data can be used against us. And saying that you are someone who has a terminal or a chronic cancer might impact your employment. And so while, all of you who are putting hi there, who are putting your name out and saying hi on Facebook, that's great. But remember, you're in a public forum, and think about what you're doing and why you want to do that, and if it's important. Because one of the things about support groups is we really remain anonymous. We really don't try to, what happens in a support group stays in a support group, and that's really important. And we try to value your privacy, but do remember that, especially as we've gone virtual, that gets harder and harder to maintain. But the people who are out there scraping the internet in public forums, these things are something to consider for those. And so while, I encourage people to share with each other, just remember the forums you do it in and how much you're sharing and what about your health conditions you want to be sharing.